everyone, my name is Jen and welcome to the Book Refuge and welcome to my October reading wrap-up. So first thing, to be completely transparent, right? I do film this usually a couple days before the end of the month, so there's a few things that I will still get read, but I always just push those over into the next month because that's how my filming schedule works. It's hard for me to do all of this on the last day of the month. Because that's just how I do everything. But I'm super excited. I've read a lot of books, as always. But before we dive into my stats and my favorite reads of the month, I do want to say a big thank you to Bex from the channel Reading with Bex, who is a new channel member of the Book Refuge. She joined at the Faded Friend level, and I'm very happy to have you, Bex. Thank you so much for your support. You mean a lot to me. So yeah, if you're interested in channel memberships, there is info about that down below. But let's not waste any time because I'm really excited to talk about my favorite reads of the month. So let's get through the stats so that we can do that. So I will have these up on the screen here, but basically in this video, if you're new here, I do weekly reading wrap-ups because I read quite a bit weekly. Weekly, I probably read what most people read in a month, in a good month. And so I don't, in my wrap-ups, go over every book that I've read. I just go over the stats for the month, and then I tell you my top 5, 6 favorite books I read in that month. If you want to know every book that I've read during the month, you'll want to check out my weekly reading wrap-ups, which go up every Sunday morning, and I go into detail about every book that I read weekly. This just allows me to talk about every book that I read, whether it's to rant about if I don't like it or, tell you what I do like about it, because in my reading wrap-ups, I just kind of want to go over the month with you and not end up taking an hour and a half, which is what they were getting to at one point, going over each book. So let's go over how I did this month. So I read 73 books, which is a total of 22,713 pages, which averaged to about 733 pages per day. So remember, this is an average, and it's also missing 3 days because I'm filming this on the 28th of the month. So my average would probably be even more than that, but it's pretty exciting. It's pretty exciting. So then the form that I read these books in is I read 3 arcs this month. I read 9 physical books. Actually, probably more than that, but some of these books, so these are the ones that I physically own that I read, but some of them I read them as ebook before I bought them physically. So originally I read 9 physical books. I read 42 ebooks, and I listened to 22 audiobooks. I'm expecting that to go down pretty significantly in November because we're losing Audible Escape, but I feel like we don't fully know which romance books will be allowed with the new Audible membership where you're supposed to be able to borrow from them. So we will see once November hits how many romances are still available that way, because yeah, I've been spending a lot more on audiobooks than normal too because I've just been purchasing some. But I don't like to do that because if you don't like the book, anyway, things that I haven't figured out yet. So then, the genres that I read this month. I read 7 fantasy romance, 53 contemporary romance, 7 paranormal romance, and 6 historical romance. So that's the breakdown of those, which it's crazy how many contemporary I've been reading, but I have just been gobbling them up. I also didn't separate erotic from contemporary this time, so I think that's part of it, because honestly, I just forgot to separate them out. So the books that I would consider erotic, they all took place during a contemporary setting anyway, so I just rolled them into it. Yeah, so then the ratings for these, I had 2 DNFs, 2 2.5 star, 5 3 star, 5 3.5 star, 31 4 stars, 11 4.5 stars, and 18 5 stars. So if you're, not new here, like if you're a regular member, that is a pretty low amount of 5 stars for me, especially out of 15 books, because that's only about a fourth of them. And I'd say the reason being for that is I read a lot of books in series this month, like a lot of them. And there was quite a few that like the continual books in the series just weren't holding up as well as the first books. So that's something that I would say about that. I mean, it's still great because if you know, for me, like I usually rate a book's either 4 or 5, and then very few books usually fall into the half star because it usually just means it's missing just a little bit of oomph for me to not do that. So yeah. All right, so I'm going to get into my favorites in just a minute here, but one other thing I want to mention is like I read a lot of new releases in October. There was a lot of books that they were either September or October releases, so that was really fun. I felt good about reading a lot of newer books again. I feel like I've been diving through a lot of older ones, which is great too, because I like to read books that not as many people have heard about, or there were books that were popular before, and it just makes me feel good to turn people on to some books that they might not have found without me. That's something that is really fun for me. Like I really like to do that. But okay, let's go through. So I picked 5 of my 5 stars to talk about in more depth as some of my favorites. I really debated not just doing all of them, but I was like, nope, don't do it. Just stick with 5 because talking about 18 books, wouldn't be able to go in as much detail as I want. So we're going to start with Bewitching by Jill Barnett. So I actually read this on ebook, both of the books in this duology, which I haven't read the second one yet. Both of them are on Kindle Unlimited. So if you want to read this, this is a historical romance. It's super cute. It even has like the Bewitched theme on the front of this one. The ebook, it doesn't look like this, but this was actually a buddy read with my friend Shay from Shay Geeks Out. We wanted to do a couple buddy reads together this month, and so this book is so cute. So I actually should have put this as like paranormal historical romance, but I did just put it under historical because in this book we have a girl named Joyce Macquarie. So she's a Scottish witch. Okay, she's a Scottish witch. And this is like she even has a ferret familiar, and it's adorable. And she is on her way to, like, she's trying to get to someplace, and she can use magic. So she does a spell to try to like teleport herself there, and she ends up dropping herself, like, it's not in the middle of a forest, but it is, she like drops herself somewhere, and it ends up being like in the path of this, is he a duke or an earl? The Duke of Belmore, whose name is Alec, and he's a Englishman, and he's this very proper, buttoned up, no time for frivolity, not really looking to get married right now, and his carriage breaks down, and it's because Joy had kind of caused this like disturbance and caused some like trees to fall down when she teleported to this area. And so he finds her kind of a little disheveled, and so he scoops her up, puts her in his carriage, and then they go about trying to move the trees out of the way so they can get on their way. And she keeps trying to like do the spell to like move, and for some reason her magic like won't let her. And so it keeps like knocking more trees down, and it's just really crazy. And so Alec, he ends up, finding a place for her to stay, and he decides that he wants to marry her. Like, he just gets this feeling about her, and he's infatuated with her. And so he like asked her to marry him, and she realizes, like, she has this epiphany that her magic was bringing her to him. Like, she just has this feeling that she is supposed to bring him joy, and her name is Joy. So she should be able to bring him joy. But she's very nervous, because she's a witch, and he's a very proper, buttoned-up person, and she feels like before they get married that she needs to tell him she's a witch. And when she tells him she's a witch, he is like, prove it. And so She tries to do her teleporting spell, and she ends up teleporting them to this like abandoned inn, and it's snowing and it's cold, and they end up stuck there. And so he's having this crisis because he's seeing the proof of that she's a witch, and he's like, oh my God, I married this witch. And so then he believes that she put a love spell on him, because like that would explain why I'm so obsessed with this woman. Take the love spell off of me. And so she's like, oh, he's not going to believe that he's just drawn to me. He's going to blame it on a love spell. And so that's kind of the thing between them. But this book, it's so funny because it is all played for like she absolutely is a witch. And that's why it's a lot like Bewitched. Like it really is like Darren and I can't remember her, Samantha. Darren and Samantha. Good of me. I just pulled that out of my head like that. But set in this time period. And also like she's Scottish, she's English. So there's also that. And so he calls her Scottish all the time. He'll just be like, what are you doing, Scottish? And it was so cute. It was absolutely adorable. I really want to read the next one. I have it on my Kindle. I should get to that soon. And I just adored it. I thought it was so sweet, so funny, and just a little bit kooky. So it was a great book to read in October. It was very fun, and both Shay and I just absolutely loved it. So then the next one I want to talk about is Love in the Wild by Emma Castle. I've already talked about this in, well, maybe you haven't seen that video. Maybe you haven't seen that video yet, but you will see it soon because Thorn is a virgin hero, owing to the fact that this is a Tarzan retelling and he lives alone in the jungle, although not really alone because he has all of his animal family and things like that. But this book, man, I've talked about this a few times, but I don't get sick of it. This book is about Eden, who is a photojournalist, and she goes on this tour. She's going to be going on this tour of the jungle, and her group gets ambushed by poachers, and the poachers kill everyone that's with her, and she's next. They're going to kill her, possibly rape her first, and Thorn comes flying in, kills all the poachers, and rescues her. And he immediately feels an attraction to her. She feels it to him too, because he's beautiful. He's a beautiful man. And he rescues her and takes care of her, and he doesn't have much speech, doesn't have many words. He doesn't know English. He has a friend, plus he was 3 when his parents died. They died in like a plane crash, or after a plane crash, something like that, and he was rescued by a gorilla, just like in Tarzan. And he's lived for 20 years or longer in the wild. And this is also like a contemporary as well, which is really cool. So like she's heard of this lost Duke of, I think he's Somerset, which is actually like a ducal, I can't remember which one he is, but she kind of pieces together who he is, because it was a really big deal that his family went missing, and they just assumed they were all dead. And so this is them falling in love, and then her trying to convince him that he still has family somewhere who will love him. But the jungle is easier in a lot of ways, right? It is the law of the jungle, and if you're the strongest, you're on top. And it's amazing. I love watching their connection. This is a gentle hero, but he is fierce and powerful, and just because he's gentle and kind doesn't make him weak by any means. And so I absolutely adored Thorn, and some people, this book isn't as much as they want it to be, but to me, this is a very sweet story. It also has like some mystery elements, and there's also, the ending is like a bit of like, okay, we went a bit far in this dramatic ending. But overall, I thought this story was so sweet, and just, man, there were so many things that I like marked out in it, because Tarzan is so wise for the way that he was raised, and it's beautiful. Like, it's so beautiful. So I highly suggest you give it a try. I believe I don't think it's on Kindle Unlimited. I think if I buy it, but then obviously I bought a copy because the back is also beautiful. It's really pretty. So highly suggest this book. Then I want to talk about A Promise of Fire by Amanda Bouchet, because yes, I was finally smart enough to read this. I knew that all of the books were on Audible Escape, and so I wanted to listen to them before Audible is no more. And I also had found the first book just at a thrift store, which was really cool. So this is a romantic fantasy, and I love it. Source Books has some really great, they call it paranormal romance, but to me this is fantasy when you're dealing with magic more than like vampires and ghosts and werewolves or something. And this is about a woman named Talia who is on the run, or Cat. And she is a like princess on the run, basically, because her mother, yeah, the world she lives in is, the world they all live in is really crazy. But there was a thing with her family, and now she's on the run. And then we have Griffin, who his family has recently taken over. The world is kind of split into 3 kingdoms, and his family has recently taken over one. And he's actually put his sister on the throne. So he is like the second in command. He like commands her armies and things like that. And he's heard about Talia, who is undercover in a circus as a soothsayer, because she has, well, she's under as a fortune teller, but she's really a soothsayer, which means she can tell when people are lying. If someone lies to her, she gets extreme pain. She is in extreme pain if someone lies to her. And if someone tells her the truth, it's like hearing a clear note out of a bell, like dong, like she can feel if someone speaks truth or not to her. And Griffin really wants that power for his kingdom so that their new kingdom can be successful. And so he finds her at this circus and kidnaps her. In fact, ties her to himself with a magical rope that she can't cut or untie or anything. And it's amazing. This is a captor-captive romance for the first book. So I also did read the second and the third books in the series. The whole trilogy is about the same couple. So in the first one, it is a slow burn, but there's a lot of sexy chemistry right away. And to me, the world was so fascinating. I really enjoyed the world building. We're like on the move the whole time. So it's also like a road trip book. So like we were on the move the whole time. It never felt boring. And again, the sexual chemistry between the two of them is there from the jump. So it never felt like it was lagging, and it was just so satisfying when something was happening. But this world is amazing. There are gods and goddesses. We get to directly interact with them at some points. And Griffin is really, he's not a bad captor-captive. There was some people who said that there was dubious consent in this book. I had heard that from some people. I at first had heard that a lot of my friends loved A Promise of Fire. A lot of them loved it. And then I had randomly heard from some people that there was dubious consent in A Promise of Fire, because someone had suggested we pick it for the Taboo Book Club for dubious consent. And I don't know what you're talking about. Maybe you're confused about what dubious consent is. But besides the fact that, like, yes, they're tied together. But here's the thing, like, Talia, she can also make herself invisible. So when they have to bathe, because he's like, I'm not going to untie you so that you can bathe, she makes herself invisible so she can bathe without him seeing her. And yes, there is a lot, like, Griffin is extremely attracted to her. She's also attracted to him. He is in the position of power, but as you will find out, like, he's not really, because Talia has a lot of powers that either A, she isn't gonna show him, but she has them, and number 2, she is blocking a lot of her own power because she's afraid of what it could do. So, yes, Griffin is trying to drag her into a political situation, into a war that she doesn't want to be a part of. But as to regards to, like, sexual things that happen between them, there's never any, like, dubious consent issues, in my opinion. So I don't know what anyone was saying. I mean, it's a captor-captive, but Griffin is kind of the nicest captor that I've, like, probably ever read, who was taking someone to take them. Like, he wasn't taking her to protect her. He is taking her because he needs her. But he is one of the most respectful captors I've ever seen, and he really is trying to convince her to help him so that he doesn't have to have taken her captive. But she's like, man, you don't know what you've done. like, there are people after me, and you taking me is not just going to bring things down on me, but it's going to bring them down on you. And like, it's really dumb, you know. So there's a lot of like, as she begins to care for this group of people who've kidnapped her, because Griffin is with his like guard, she begins to worry more and more, because she's like, no, this really isn't funny. Like, it's bad that you kidnapped me, because the person who's after me will have no qualms at all about coming after you too. And you have like doomed yourself for it. So I really loved Griffin and Talia. They made me so happy. Like, just so happy. Okay, so the next book I want to talk about, I actually just finished last night. And it ended up getting on this list because that happens to me sometimes too. The most recent book that I read, if it's a 5-star, it becomes my favorite. And this one totally did that. So I need to recheck who suggested it to me. But on Goodreads, you can like recommend books to people. And I randomly had a viewer like suggest this book to me. And it was Captive. And it's by R.J. Lewis, and I didn't know anything about it, but it was this book, and it had said that this girl is being held captive on a private island by this guy, and they have a like obviously she's a captive, but there's like consensual non-consent also happening, and that she really likes everything that he's doing to her, so it makes it hard for her to actually want to get away from him. And I don't know, the whole thing just sounded right up my alley. Like, it just was like, this sounds like me. And so I found it on Audible for only like a couple dollars, and then I bought the book. It's on Kindle Unlimited, but it was only 99 cents, so I just bought the book. And I started it last night at like 9 o'clock at night. And this is a 600-page book, so I finished it at 1 o'clock last night. And it was just, wow, it was fantastic. So this is about Vixen and Nixon. And so I kind of explained that she's captive on this private island. It isn't a solitary island. So there are some aspects of this that reminded me of like Julian and Nora from Twist Me, but also not, because Nixon is, I really liked Nixon a lot. Like, he definitely is a manipulator in some aspects, but the beauty of this story, so I don't want to spoil it because this isn't one of those kind of reviews, but the book is split up into 3 parts, and it's set up in current time, past time, and then like future time, which it isn't future because the future is our present by the time we get to it, but it's set up in current, past, and then current, but like future current. And so we are dropped right into Vixen is held captive by Nixon. He owns this hotel on this private island. He basically owns the private island, but like other people live there. And he's part of a group that's kind of like an Ocean's 11 thing. Like, they do heists, they do robberies. So every like few months they get together, plan a job, and then go and do it. And that's what keeps their money funded. And we know that at some point in the past, actually 2 years ago, is when Nixon first met Vixen. It's hard to keep their names separate. And how do I say this? And so she's been with him for quite some time, and she is always asking him to let her go. And so we start with a scene which was like, it was really hot as someone who loves like consensual non-consent, because I wasn't sure about the story. I was like, is this all fake? Is she not really his captive, but is like a kept woman and like plays it like she is? Because Nixon is just so calm about everything, but he gets back from a job, and in her head she's like, oh no, he's back. But also she's immediately like really aroused that he's there. And he climbs in and he's like, did you miss me? Tell me that you miss me. And she's like, no, I'm never going to tell you miss me. My soul will still always belong to me. Like, so all these things. So you're like, oh wow, she really isn't into this. But then they have like super great sex together, and she's always really happy when he's back. And then the next day, she like throws a really big fit, and he's just very calm through the whole thing until she makes him mad, and then they have angry sex again. And so there's just this pattern of like, she pushes him and he stays really aloof and just like ignores her, and then they end up having you know, she like craves that like violence from him, even though he's very like, he's not reluctant to give it, but he isn't abusive to her in any way. And so these are the things she has to reconcile herself with, is he's like, I provide everything that you need. Why do you need to leave? It's not safe for you anywhere else. I have everything you, like, just that over and over again. And she's like, but I'm not free. And he's like, you are free. You can do anything here that you want, except leave. And so it's this like mind fuck for her, because she every day is like, you know, I do want to be with him, but they're getting to this point where she's like, I'm just throwing these fits all the time. I don't feel healthy in my mind, but he's so obsessed with her that he doesn't want to let her go. And so, okay, that's probably enough like base of that. So that's what the present time is. And then there comes a point in, you know, this back and forth between them where he's like, how do you think we ended up here? And she's like, you took me. And he's like, I think you're remembering this wrong. I think you need to go back in your mind and remember how we got here. So then I was like, oh my gosh, where's this going to go? And like, that's what I won't spoil for you, because it's amazing, but it's very clear through, like, things are not what they seem. And we get to, after that part of like seeing where we are right now, we get to see her flash back to how she first met Nixon and how they got here. And then we get to see them after she remembers, because she's kind of blocked it out, how she first met him. And she's kind of forgetting how they ended up here. So that, I'll stop. But this was fascinating. If you love Captor Captive, you might really like this. If you don't like Captor Captive and you've been hesitant to read one because you're afraid it might be too dark, this might be a good one. I'm trying to think of, because it looks a lot darker than it is as well. And of course there are still trigger warnings, and there's consensual non-consent happening, and it's not apparent that it's consensual non-consent in the beginning. So know that. I will tell you that as like, it's kind of a spoiler, but the relationship that they have, to a certain point, like, she's okay with it. So there's more consent than non-consent happening, if that makes sense. So I think this book could be a good place for some people to start who are afraid, who are like nervous about either of those two aspects in a romance, but want to try one. Especially because Taboo Book Club in November, we were doing consensual non-consent and dubious consent. So there's that. And they actually call it like dubious consent in parts of the book too. So I feel like that's good. So, all right. I'll say enough about that one. Let us move on to the last one I want to talk about, which is The Rivalry by Nikki Sloane. So this book is about Kayla and Jay, and they meet at a wedding. It is he is friends with the groom, she's friends with the bride. They meet at this wedding. They are both still in college. They almost have a one-night stand, but it doesn't. And then they don't get each other's numbers, because he like put his number into her phone, but he like messed up when he put it in. So she's like, oh, did he give me a fake number? Whatever. She gets up the guts to ask her friend's new husband, who's Jay's friend, for his number. And he's like, you know what? There's this bar he goes to every Saturday. You should surprise him there. So it's a little drive from where she goes to school, but she's like, you know what? I really like this guy. He was really kind to me that night, and I want to see him again. So she does it, except when she gets to this bar, it is a Michigan State bar, and she goes to Ohio State. I think I have these right. I'm not big into football, especially college football, but she was born at an Ohio State game because her dad was the coach there for a long time, and her mom like had her in the stands, and so she's a cheerleader for that team, and it's a big thing. And he doesn't really care about this rivalry so much, but she is like, dude, you don't even understand how big of a deal this is. Like, you just don't even get it. And so he wants to pursue her, because she meets him at this bar, and she's like, oh my God, my friend tricked me, because her her friend's husband, like, they don't get along very well because he went to Michigan State too. And so he totally tricked her with this. And Jay is just like, I don't get why it's such a big deal. And she's like, dude, my family, like, would disown me for this. And number two, like, you don't understand how much shit you would get, because it's actually Jay's fault that, like, Ohio State lost the last rivalry game that they had. And Jay is just like, you know what, we got enough other stuff in our way, like the fact that our schools are so far apart, the fact that, you know, we're so busy. Don't make this as big of a deal as you're trying to make it. And so he goes about really pursuing her as well as he can from living so far away. And it was just fun. I really liked it. So the few things that made this so good. Number one, this is Nikki Sloane. I'm obsessed with Nikki Sloane. I love her. I've read this was the last book of hers that I hadn't read. And I'd been saving it. And I love it. I loved it. It's so good. And the thing about Jay that I love so much is there is some really great sexual communication in this book. So Kayla, she has a hard time orgasming. And so much so in the fact that she has, like, you know, faked it before because, you know, she feels like she's too much work, or that, you know, if a guy's already, you know, made her come, like, before they have sex, and will just, like, fake it when it's happening. Which, number one, I liked that in this book she showed that you don't always orgasm at the same time when you're doing it. But it showed that after Jay he wouldn't just, like, get off her and roll over. He would go back to work and be like, nope, you're getting this too. And was some great conversation where one of the times with him, she does fake it, right? She does fake it just because, like, she knows he's had a long, it's so silly, like, even saying it out loud, right? But, like, women do this. We do this sometimes. And it's not because of always a nefarious reason, or we think the guy's lazy. Like, Jay, he does his work. He's great. But she's like, it doesn't need to be twice. Like, it's fine. But Jay is like, no, like, I'm going to make this happen. And in a really sexy way, not in a, like, I need my ego to. It's because he cares about her so much. And so she does fake it. And, like, he can tell because she has been orgasming before. And then this time she fakes it. And he's like, what the fuck was that? Like, he kind of laughs at her a little. He's like, what are you doing? And she's like, I feel bad. And he's like, honey, it's not a deal. Like, this is not a big deal. Like, I'm here for you. I want to do this. And so he does. And she just cares about him so much. So much. Like, they both, just the care that he takes with her, it's great. The sex in it's hot. It's Nikki Sloane. It's fantastic. And then another reason this got 5 stars and is one of my favorite is that this is a college romance. And sometimes those don't have the best conflict, right? Number one, this rivalry, like, I believed it because I'm not a sports fanatic, but I could see her being the cheerleader for the rival team of his, like, and her dad was the coach for it. Like, I could see that being a big deal. Not a deal to keep people away from each other, but I could see how that could, you know, it could be a big blocker in a new couple's relationship. And there are times where Jay just gets, like, because she, again, is way more worried about the rivalry than him and, like, wants to keep them a secret and stuff like that, where he's just like, why are you doing this to us? Like, I need you to stop being, like, fighting against me so much. And so the final, like, conflict of this, the thing that happens, I felt so uncomfortable because it was an icky situation. And I felt for both of them so much. And I believe that Nikki Sloane made the right choice in, like, who decides to bend to who. Like, I agree with the choice that she made because the stakes are a lot higher for one person than the other. Like, especially monetarily, because we're talking about people trying to get into the NFL and things. But I also liked the grovel then that happened because one person did bend. The grovel of the other person was so sweet. I love a good grovel. I love it. So I really liked the rivalry a lot. So there you go. Those are my stats for October 2020, as well as my top 5 favorite books. If you're interested in channel memberships, please check it out. If you're interested in some of the books that I mentioned, make sure you check out my Amazon list below. I list pretty much all the books that I've read every month. You can find in there if you want to learn more about them or want to purchase. If you purchase through an affiliate link, it does give me a little bit of kickback. It's a very little, but it does help, right? And it also shows them that you're buying books that I mentioned, which is great. So thank you so much for watching this. I put up new videos 4 to 5 days a week. You can find me on my socials down below in my link tree if you want to, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.